Today's podcast is sponsored by Shauna Hawkins Photography. Welcome to the Mental Health Raw and Open podcast with your host, Jody Betty.
Hi, and welcome to the Mental Health Raw and Open podcast. Today, we are blessed to have Dr. Christina Stai as a guest. Christina, how are you?
I am doing wonderful, Jody. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
No, and thank you for coming on. I feel like I've known you on and off for like a few years on Twitter, and same with your hubby, and we've never had really a chance to have a conversation. So I'm really excited for this.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. Excited to delve into things.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, my name is Christina Stai. I am a licensed clinical psychologist, and I have my own private practice. I co-own it with my husband, Josh. He's the kind of business administrative end, and I am the clinical side of things.
Excellent.
Holistic Resources Clinic is our practice. We've been in business for about 6 years. We are currently a fully virtual telehealth platform.
Nice.
And we were in person at first. We opened our doors in September of 2019, which is about 6 months before COVID hit.
Yes.
So we, like everyone else kind of did at the beginning of the pandemic in March of 2020, we closed up our physical doors and everything went fully virtual. I have had really just so much success with that. It's been great for my clients. It's been great for me that we just have kind of stayed fully telehealth since then. So
Nothing like therapy in your pajamas, I tell you.
I think the bigger thing for me is just a level of accessibility. So
Yes.
where if transportation is an issue or
Mhm.
I live in the Midwest, so weather is a factor. Like 10 months out of the year, it could be a tornado or a thunderstorm or a blizzard,
Yes.
or torrential rain or winds. And
Yeah.
so the accessibility piece has been helpful. And just being able, we have a lot of rural areas in the state that I'm in. I'm in Iowa. And so a lot of mental health resources are very centrally located to bigger cities.
Right.
And there's a lot of people that live in rural areas and have to drive maybe 2, 3, 4 hours just to get anywhere. So,
Wow.
so being able to access all of Iowa has been really helpful. So I'm licensed in Iowa. I also have my license in California. That is where I was actually born and raised in Southern California. So I did all of my training and education there.
Okay.
And then, so I have my license there. And then I recently got certified as an out-of-state telehealth provider for the state of Florida as well. So so I can provide services to anyone in the states of Iowa, California, or Florida.
So you have to get certified per state?
Yeah, typically,
Okay.
yes. So there are some states where there's maybe like a reciprocity thing. So if I have a license in one state, then it potentially could translate to another state
Right.
if I pay them for the license.
Of course, I'm thinking, is this just like a financial thing?
Yeah.
Like
So
a money
typically,
grab.
so typically you need to hold a license in each state that you want to be practicing in. And that's for, liability reasons. And every state kind of has their own set of kind of guidelines and standards. So they don't necessarily fully translate, from state to state. So, so some states require, certain things and different kind of expectations or continuing education units or things like that. So, I am looking kind of longer term to credential in other states as well. Trying to be strategic with that. My goal would be to be able to have access to people across the country and maybe, even internationally would be really awesome. So
Come to Canada.
Canada, I know, I would love to. Yeah, so I think, my practice is unique in a number of ways. So our name is Holistic Resources, and we really operate under a very holistic perspective. So that body, mind, and spirit connection. A lot of the medical field and the mental health field has kind of done a lot of separation. Like medical doctors take care of the body. Mental health
Oh, they've
providers are.
completely removed the head from the body, and there's no correlation to anything.
So as we know that there's, I mean, those of us that are, kind of into some of the somatic work and things like that, there is a lot of connection, and
Yes.
the way that how our body is a representation of where we're at mentally and emotionally, and vice versa. So,
Yeah.
mental and emotional problems can get manifested in very physical ways. So
Yes.
I like to take a very holistic approach and kind of look at all aspects, body, mind, and spirit of an individual. Um, and I really try to integrate that into the work that I do. And the populations that I work with, I do kind of a 50-50 split generally between therapy and testing, psychological and diagnostic assessment. Um,
Okay.
for my therapy practice, I work primarily with kids, teens, and young adults. And then for testing, I see people of all ages.
Right.
And I know we were talking a little in the back channel, Jody, but I service a lot of individuals. I see people with a lot of needs and a lot of diagnoses, but my biggest passion and the niche that I've really kind of carved out for myself has been in the area of neurodivergence. So the vast majority of the clients that I work with are neurodivergent or suspected neurodivergent in some
Right.
capacity. So, and my assessments really kind of are tailored to that. I do a lot of autism evaluations, ADHD evaluations, learning disability evaluations, and things of that nature. And of course, looking at other aspects as well. So complex trauma can certainly be a factor. Anxiety, depression, if there are some OCD tendencies. So I try to do very comprehensive work in everything that I do. So
I
um,
love that.
yeah, and the neurodivergent piece, I've worked with neurodivergent kids for a very long time, probably about 20 years. And I'm also late diagnosed, self-diagnosed autistic and ADHD. So there isn't just like the kind of professional experience. There is that very personal lived experience that I have too, that I think really kind of carves out a niche for me. And I
And
would
a
love to,
connection.
yeah,
Like nothing beats a connection than knowing that your therapist actually knows what you're feeling,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I feel like I've always kind of attracted neurodivergent folks to me, and kids especially. And I at first was just like, oh, I'm really good with kids. And now that I have like a little bit more of that kind of understanding and revelation of my own neurotype, I'm like, oh no, like they're attracted to me because we're the same. Like our brains kind of just recognize
Hmm.
like-minded brains. And so I
Yeah.
think that that's been a big reason why I've been able to connect so well with that population, even before I knew I was neurodivergent myself.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I don't know. I guess I would qualify myself as some sort of neurodivergent. Um, I was originally diagnosed with borderline. I highly believe it is CPTSD. I
Mhm.
went through excessive trauma from day one of like literally day one till I was 19. And it definitely has taken a long time and am still in the process of learning to rewire my brain to get rid of those negative loops, those tapes that, consistently play over and over and over again, and then catching them and then trying to replace them with something good so that every time, I start to think that eventually the good thought's going to take over without me having to think about it, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. I see a lot of complex trauma, and that really makes everything else very complex, right? So
Yes,
partially,
it
so
really does.
yeah, it can really, and it can be hard sometimes to differentiate between complex trauma and neurodivergence, but certainly both can exist.
Yes.
And neurodivergent individuals do have I would say like a higher tendency or a higher level of vulnerability um, to being victimized, and that's for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so
Do you get a lot, like I noticed lately, like in the past couple of years, there's been a lot of like adult friends of mine, like, 30, 40, who are just now realizing, oh my gosh, and being diagnosed autistic, and they didn't know, but they're now going back on their head going, oh my God, this is explaining so much of my behavior for the past 30 years, right?
yeah, that's been actually, I've noticed that too. So when I first was in practice, I mean, most of my, I would say, clinical experience has been with kids and teens. I was trained in adult assessments and evaluations. I was trained to do therapy with adults as well. But I always felt like I just, on a therapeutic level, connected better with kids. But it was then really kind of at the height of the pandemic. I started getting a very large influx of adult referrals for ADHD and autism evaluations that I had never seen before. Um, Even working, I had been at a group practice for a few years where some of the other providers were predominantly working with adults, and they weren't getting adult autism and ADHD evaluations either. So I do think I don't really believe in coincidences. I think that there was something about, when everything was in chaos and everything shut down and we were all out of our routines, right? For a very long time.
Yeah.
Some areas longer than others, just depending on where we were in the world and things like that. But everything was really locked down, and people were spending a lot of time at home, and a lot of time like 24/7 with people. Like, I mean, even, my relationship with my husband, we did a lot of things together, but we weren't together 24/7. And so
Right, right. And all of a sudden you're like, whoa.
lockdown. And so I did see a lot of that was where I saw like a lot of influx of adult evaluation referrals coming in. And I was like, this is unusual. And in my area especially, there aren't really a lot of testing psychologists in the state of Iowa. And even those that are here, most people are not really trained in adult evaluations for ADHD and autism. People do
Right.
adult assessments pretty frequently, but specifically targeting, conditions that up until maybe a handful of years ago were really considered to be predominantly like childhood conditions. ADHD and autism were considered to be, right, like they get diagnosed in childhood. They're maybe potentially difficult or problematic in childhood. But there really wasn't a lot of, I would say, support for
Hmm.
or education or training or any of that for the adult population. And so I decided to get myself trained in that because I saw a need. And so I put a lot of time and diligence into doing a lot of my own kind of research, my own studying, looking at different evaluations and assessments. Because truthfully, they're really, I would say, still are not the most like amazing assessments out there for adults. I mean, everything is very tailored and targeted to children.
Right.
And I feel like that is an area that's lacking. It's getting better. And there is a battery that I use pretty typically for ADHD, a battery that I use for autism, that I feel like is a decent battery. But I also then have my own kind of research and training and education around how to really parse that out. So I would say at this point, I typically am doing more testing for adults than I am for children. And that's it. That really hasn't slowed down since about August of 2020 is when I really started to see that spike in adult referrals. And I think a lot of it is, kind of around that same time, there was a large, I would say, like neurodiversity affirming advocacy movement. There was a lot kind of coming out on social media platforms, a lot of self-identified or formally diagnosed autistic and ADHD individuals who were adults and coming and speaking out and disclosing their diagnoses and kind of talking about, that lived experience. And I think for ADHD too, but I really think for autism, it has really started to help broaden the concept around like how wide of a spectrum autism is. I think,
Right. It's huge.
yeah, I mean, and even, a handful of years ago, I just don't think that we had the level of awareness around like how autism can present so differently in different people.
Yes,
So
absolutely. Do you think part of it was just like the isolation and too much time? Like, what else did you have to do? If you lived on your own, like, I mean, you're with your thoughts and yourself for like far too long.
yeah, I certainly think the isolation took a mental toll on a lot of people. I don't think that that COVID like caused autism though. So I
Right.
think,
No, of course not. Yeah.
but what I would say is I think, so somebody like me, I'm very routine driven, um, and so to have your entire routine turned upside down and to
Right.
have and for there to really be no end in sight, like there was so much that was just very uncertain, especially in those first, 6 to 9 months, well, even really the first year or so until things, different kind of recommendations started coming out and options and things like that. But I think that was it for a lot of people, that just being so kind of outside of our routine and comfort zone, that when we're under a state of stress, at least for me, like that is when some of my autistic traits and characteristics really tend to, they're very noticeable for me.
Okay.
I get very rigid. I have a difficult time with emotional regulation. I get very like distracted and anxious. And so I think that stressor really was something that kind of just really evoked a lot of realization for people that under not ideal circumstances, oh, there are some things that I'm really struggling with. The other piece of it, I think, was just, in my situation, being with somebody 24/7, being with my husband 24/7, even though I would say we knew each other really well. But when you're with somebody all the time, he was the one that really diagnosed me. I mean, he knew the population that I worked with. He knew a little bit about, autism and ADHD and, and anxiety and other conditions, but he was the one that was like
Noticing the
noticing
behaviors.
things. Like he
Yeah.
noticed me doing like little random stims when I was like taking my dogs out, like things that I was just totally, I was oblivious to. Like I didn't even know that I was doing half of the things that I was doing. And he was like, Christina, like you kind of do, like you remind me of XYZ client, or you kind of do the same thing. Because at that point he knew my clients because he's co-owner, he was the office manager. So when we were in person, he knew and interacted with, all of the clients that I
Right.
had at the time. So
Right.
we really had a reference point then, of like, yeah, like you kind of do a lot of these same things. And so that was a big realization. And I think that was probably true for others as well, like having that time with other people who knew them very well. And then we're suddenly getting to see all of their little like
Quirks and
quirks
yeah.
and mannerisms and things like that. I do think that probably had something to do with it. And not just for adults, but I believe probably for children too, right? Because everyone was home for a very long
Mhm.
time, right? So parents even having that like 24/7 like interaction with their kid, not having them at school, I think had an opportunity to really see like a lot of the nuances and a lot of the behaviors that they might not necessarily have seen if we weren't
Right.
like all stuck together
Right. Right.
in the
Right.
same house or apartment, for 9 months on end. So
Yes.
yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, that's awesome. I'm glad that you know, I'm glad you took your assessments to be able to assess adults, but I understand your passion for helping children.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think, it really is. I've realized that the passion really is across the lifespan, right? Because children become adults,
Yeah.
and adults often have children. And so, right. So I think really looking at it from a generational standpoint too has been really helpful for me. Because there is also, I mean, we do know that there is a genetic component to some degree.
Right. Yes.
So it's very common if there is one neurodivergent individual in a family, it's very common or very likely that there are other neurodivergent, or I would say neurodivergent adjacent individuals. So
Hmm.
people with at least maybe some traits or characteristics, even if they don't necessarily fully meet, a diagnostic criteria for any
Right.
diagnosis. But I see that very frequently. And I've actually, a lot of the assessments that I've done, I'll be doing an assessment for children, a child, and the parents are obviously very involved in an assessment process for their child. And a lot of times I'll see light bulbs start to go off. Not for the parents having like a revelation of their child, though of course that happens too, but I'm asking questions and the parents are like, oh, well, that sounds
Right.
that sounds like me, or oh, that reminds me of how I was when I was a kid. And so
Yeah.
I have actually had a number of people where I was doing an assessment for their child and then the parent ended up wanting to get an assessment too. And so then I, was able to do an assessment basically for the whole family. So
Oh my gosh, that's great.
too. So I think that that's been really helpful for families, right? And parents being able to better understand themselves and their neurotypes, and then understanding, how that can help in their interaction or relationship with their child, or maybe better understanding like, oh, this is why parenting is so hard, or this is why we tend to butt heads. Our brains are very similar, or our brains are very different. And I think, all of that can just be really helpful for the family unit as a whole.
I think for the kids too, because like you don't feel quite as alone if your parent has something similar. Do you know what I'm saying? Like it's kind
Yeah,
of like,
absolutely.
yeah. So that's awesome. What are like I know there's like no treatments, but what are some of like the things that you work on with the kids?
Sure. So I would say, I mean, so if we're thinking about like autism specifically, I mean, where some of the traits and characteristics, I mean, the predominant traits and characteristics that kind of make up autism are centered around communication, differences in communication, and that really kind of means more like social communication. So some children do also have language or speech delays that can be a part of it. But when we're talking about language differences and communication differences, that's really more on a social level. So that can sometimes cause challenges with social interactions because we maybe misinterpret things that people are saying, or we aren't quite able to articulate ourselves the way that we want to. And so that can cause misinterpretations, that can cause
Yeah.
misunderstandings. So I do work quite a bit with children. The term social skills gets thrown out there a lot, and I don't particularly like to use the word skills because I think all children have social skills. But it's more a matter of learning how to relate to others who are similar to us, and then also
Right.
understanding and relating to others who are different than us. And so I think kind of understanding like the way that my brain works, and understanding, oh, okay, like if somebody says something to me, I tend to think very literally, or I'm very black and white in my thinking. And so if somebody says something, I'm going to take it very literally. And then I need to know, that might not be how they meant it. And so
Right.
I would then ask
Yes.
for clarification or understanding. So I
Yeah.
do a lot of, I would say, work and coaching around social relationships and social communication. A lot of autistic kids that I work with don't necessarily always pick up on sarcasm
Yeah.
or humor, or if somebody is making kind of a passive aggressive comment. And so, sometimes I have kids that are being kind of very discreetly teased or bullied, and they or taken advantage of, and they don't know that that's happening.
Right. Right.
So I do a lot of work just even kind of around like safety planning and things like that, and how, who's a safe person, who's not a safe person, because kids especially are vulnerable to being victimized. And if they're very more kind of naive or take things at face value, that does kind of open us up for, you know, a higher likelihood of being victimized or taken advantage of in some ways. So that's a component of it. The other kind of main core facet around autism is around restricted interests and repetitive behaviors. And so that can look like a lot of different things. That is where, you know, some stimming comes into play. So, and stims can be motor stims. So people might do different kind of weird hand movements, or I'm using my hands a lot because they're on camera. But rocking behaviors, kind of toe walking, sitting in kind of awkward positions or things like that. But there are also verbal stims. So sometimes people will use their voice. They might repeat a word or a phrase, or they might hum, or things like that. And a lot of the stims are they're there a lot of times for regulation. So, you know, I remember when I was very, very little, I would do kind of like a humming, grunting noise when I was concentrating, and it actually helped me focus. And
Right.
My parents were very worried that I was going to do that when I was at school, because it would be very distracting to other people. And so they worked with me of like, you know, when to do it and when was it okay, and when just to be mindful of, hey, like if you're around a lot of other people, that might distract people. But kind of in that category too, there can be a lot of, that's where our rigid behaviors can come from too. So being very, needing things to happen a very specific way, being very black and white in our thinking, being very rule oriented and focused, having some difficulty with transitions, especially if something is kind of unexpected. Autistic individuals are not typically go with the flow people. If something, even a little thing, if it like throws me off of my routine, can it can derail my entire day if I'm not mindful of it. Even as an adult, it can do that. And I think much more so for kids, because kids don't necessarily have the same level of just control in general, right? A lot of things are kind of dictated for them. So even something as simple as, oh, there's a substitute teacher today, or oh, there is a fire drill that we're going to have, or an earthquake drill. I grew up in California, so we had earthquake drills, not so much in the Midwest, or things like that. You know, even things that, like, I would say, like, a lot of the vast majority of non-autistic individuals, little things like that don't necessarily tend to throw people off. You know, they tend to be a lot more flexible, or can kind of bounce back. Autistic individuals tend to have a very difficult time with that. You know, so that's an area that I work with kids a lot around too, is kind of managing some of the anxiety that can come from that, or some of the emotional dysregulation that can come from that, because it can be very distressing to be, you know, thrown out of your routine. So working on kind of managing some of that and kind of regaining and reclaiming some control over my emotions, you know, regaining control, like what do I have control over? What don't I have control over?
Right. Circle of control.
Yeah. I do a lot of body-based work too. So because I find, you know, autistic individuals, we tend to be we sometimes have a hard time connecting in with our bodies. And that would be exemplified too if there was also some trauma that had occurred. But even without there being, you know, significant trauma or abuse, like I get very disconnected from my body, because my brain is just going a mile a minute. And so, you know, being able to kind of do some grounding exercises, some anchoring exercises, some kind of senses-based exercises, that can go a long way for that regulation process. So that's, I would say, just some ideas of some of the work that I do. And it can, you know, it looks very different for different children, and of course would look somewhat different, you know, for adults than it does for children, though a lot of it is the same. Like, we as adults need a lot of the same support. Like, I need grounding techniques. I need help remembering what I have control over, what I don't have control over, reminding myself that I have control over my responses and I have control over not necessarily what my emotions are, but how do I respond, those.
Yes. Oh my God.
So
The
yeah,
reaction, the reaction.
yeah, yeah.
I used to be very black and white thinking as well, and very reactive. And um, I think someone told me just to say the word pause.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I say pause in my head, I know not to pick up my phone to respond to that text, not to respond to the email right away, to leave it for 5 to 30 minutes before I have an irrational response, so I don't have an irrational response, because sometimes it can be like an instant, like, what? You said what? Blah, 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 blah. And then that's not what I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
That's my emotions taking over and saying, okay, you've obviously triggered something in me. Now it's my responsibility as an adult, unfortunately, to figure out what that trigger was,
Yes.
whether it was you triggering me or if it was just a trigger in me,
Yeah,
and then figure
absolutely.
out how to regulate the emotions that go with that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I utilize quite a bit of, I really like dialectical behavior therapy, which is
Hmm.
DBT.
Yep.
Um, there's so many facets to it, but one of the things that I like the best, I really like Venn diagrams. Um, and so one of the concepts of DBT is looking at our different states of mind. So we have our kind of rational, logical mind. We have our emotional mind. And we need both of those, right? So the rational, logical side is the one that is very kind of like very matter of fact, very fact oriented, very methodical, very analytical, um, like a critical thinker, right? So
Hmm.
being able to really look at things from a purely like critical
Logical
thinking level,
standpoint.
very logical
Yeah.
standpoint. Um, our emotion mind is also very important. It is what makes us empathic beings. It's what makes us, connected to other people. But the emotion mind kind of on its own is devoid of logic. The logic mind on its own is devoid of emotion. Neither of those is great if we are in a
Yeah.
place of logical mind or emotional mind for too long of a period of time. And the integration of those two is called wise mind. And so I do a lot of that work with both kids and adults of how can we get ourselves back into a place of wise mind. And the goal is not that we are always in wise mind, because I mean, frankly, I have not yet met a human that is able to stay in wise mind all the time. So we have times where we are more in our emotion mind, we are more in our logic mind. But being able to kind of find that integration, that's part of the grounding and anchoring too. So
Right.
yeah, I really like that concept, and I utilize that a lot with the people I work with.
One thing that stuck with me, I think it was from DBT or CBT, was thoughts are not, no, feelings are not facts.
Mm-hmm.
That writing out what I'm feeling right now and then seeing it on paper and then stepping back for a second and writing down the facts and going, wait a second, why am I like freaking out about this fact? Because the fact is the truth, right? And emotions aren't necessarily truths, they're just everything all bundled together, like anxieties and past feelings and traumas and everything. So I think that's one thing that kind of stuck with me from that. And I do tell people, thoughts are not feelings. So, or facts are thoughts, feelings are not facts.
Yes, feelings are not facts. Yeah. Yeah, I love that. That's yeah, that is a CBT, a cognitive behavioral therapy principle. But it really DBT and CBT have a lot of overlap too. So
Yeah.
CBT really kind of breaking down like our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors and how they interact with and influence each other. But I think, yeah, having that separation between thoughts and feelings can be really helpful, um, because our feelings, so the goal is never to be invalidating our feelings, but being able to take a logical approach to my feelings, my emotions in a moment are going to put a filter over the information that's coming in, and that might not really be that might not be accurately what is happening objectively. That might not be what is happening. I might think this person said this thing and this is what they meant by it, and that may be true, but oftentimes, when we're in a very like emotionally heightened place, we magnify a lot of things, we misinterpret a lot of things, and that's true for all of us. That's not just an autistic thing. But I will say that autistic individuals tend to have very, very big emotions. We are many of us have a very, very high level of empathy. The way that we experience and express empathy can look different than a non-autistic individual. And so sometimes, there's a myth that autistic individuals don't have empathy. Well, it's not that. And I'm sure there are some autistic individuals out there that really struggle with empathy. There's also plenty of non-autistic people who struggle with empathy. But it really is more just a difference in kind of perception and how we experience it, and then how that gets translated. Right. So, I think like most of the autistic individuals that I work with are they fit what's called a highly sensitive profile. They're hyper empathic. They feel things very, very deeply. And that a lot of times is what can contribute to a sensory like overwhelm. So a lot of autistic individuals experience autistic overwhelm, autistic meltdowns, autistic shutdowns, because the sensory input that is coming in is just so much and so overwhelming, and we have a hard time filtering it. Autistic individuals are very much like sponges. A lot of the time we kind of absorb everything. And as kids, especially, kids don't necessarily know how to even distinguish like what is their energy versus the energy of another person. And so that can be a lot of, when we're talking about, and sensory issues are very common for autistic individuals in general, but I think a large part of it is just because we're absorbing like everything that's coming in around us. So it's not necessarily just like, oh, well, I'm sensitive to lights, or I'm sensitive to sounds. I'm
sensitive to all this energy in the entire world, and it seems like it's piling in on me.
Yeah, because we absorb all of it, right? Yeah. And we don't necessarily know how to filter it out. We can learn how to filter it out and how to put in a better filter and regulate that. But a lot of that is even just kind of then being able to, maybe choose the spaces that we're in. Like, hey, I know, like, I cannot go sit in a cafeteria because that is going to be just an overwhelm of sensory experiences. Like, that's never going to be something that I can do or choose to do. And so I'm going to go sit outside, or I'm going to get food to go instead of being in a loud, noisy restaurant or things like that. So that's a big component of things too, I think.
Yeah, I feel like that too. Like, I feel like because I was in survival mode for so long that I'm just super hyper alert, like hyper aware all the time. Like, no one can sneak up on me. I know my surroundings at all times. Like, I can go to, let's say, have a coffee with a friend, and I'm actively listening to this coffee, but I cannot tune out in my ears that, Carol over there is complaining about a donut, and George wants another coffee, and all this static noise in my head, and I'm trying not to listen, but I can't help it.
Yeah.
This is like, it's just part of being hyper alert, and I have to like ground myself, remind myself where I am. I don't care what Carol and George are doing. I'm trying to listen to my conversation.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, I know you probably have a client. I'm guessing probably coming up pretty soon. I want to thank you so much for your time. It was lovely to chat with you.
Absolutely, Jody. I really appreciate you having me. And yeah, I'm a big proponent of everyone just really kind of trying to, break the stigma around mental health in general, and have this be a place, where we can have open dialogue and conversations about all things mental health. So thank you for what you do. And
well, I always do part 2, so I'll be catching up with you in a couple of months.
All right, that sounds great. I'd love to be back.
All right, thanks so much, Christina. You take care. Have a great day.
You too. Take care.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Mental Health Raw and Open podcast with your host, Jody Betty. Our sponsor for this episode is Shauna Hawkins Photography. With a variety of prints and keepsakes to suit any decor, you're guaranteed to find the perfect piece for your space. Visit shauna-hawkins.pixels.com and make your neighbors jealous today. If you enjoyed today's show, please give it a like and don't forget to smash that subscribe button. And if you appreciate the work I do, why not buy me a coffee? Details in the show notes. Today's episode was recorded and edited by Dorian Kent and produced by Jody Betty and Dorian Kent. This has been a Raw and Open production.